Hi, everybody. So we are at 1,982 days since Richard was forcibly removed from his barracks room there on Fort Bliss in El Paso, Texas. He was taken to the basement room, which is the arms room. It is a soundproof room. It's the room of choice to do these kind of things. And of course, we just posted the seal on the door. Uh, we have confirmation that that room was renovated with no expense spared and not following. It was ordered. It was ordered. Um, and without the regular protocols that you have to go through to get bids and everything like that. So Richard's was taken there and his life was taken. That's the crime scene. And then his body was trafficked off of Fort Bliss. And we believe there's organ harvesting involved in this. That's why there was the reports of the dismemberment and that he was taken over to Mexico for disposal. Um, that's why we have reports of his body being over there by multiple agency, the very good sources. So we want our son's remains, and we know that what we have filed over and over again, all these years have been overwhelming evidence. That's why in April of 2024 they declared Richard deceased. And then in January, 4 days after President Trump took office, January 24th, it was in the line of duty, because there was so many false narratives out there about our son. And there is still a lot of false narratives about our son. Um, and that's really important for people to understand why they do this, that this is a playbook, that when there's a whistleblower, and especially like Richard, that was uh, not uh, not compromised, right? Someone like Richard that was a reliable source, not only that, but had extra weight for his reports because he had such a stellar record. His test score is stellar. He was number one in basic training and number one in AIT. He was the guidon bearer. Um, he was making rank very quickly with waivers. They were just waving him through because he was so stellar. Um, and that's why, it's not like me bragging about him. That's not the point that I'm making, even though we're very proud of our hero, our son. Um, the point that I've been trying to make all these years is that he was a reliable source. He was a reliable source for what they were doing, the trafficking and the orchestration of the Walmart mass shooting on base at the Fort Bliss was absolutely engaged in that, and that the leadership was engaged in no good. And he was a reliable source. He was an honorable soldier. And so what they had to do is figure out a way to discredit him, to smear him. And that's why from the very beginning, and before we knew, before he his life was taken, they started conjuring up ways to discredit him, to smear him, and nothing stuck, y'all. Nothing stuck. Now, in the documentation that he went through, um, this targeting, it is there, yes, but he's his record is stellar, okay, and it was so stellar that they had to erase the Article 15 with maximum punishment from his file. They had to erase it. And we requested that, and um, they had to do it. So because there was nothing there, there was no, there was just abuse of power there. That was what you saw, abuse of power. So I think that's why they erased it, because they didn't want to show the uh, clear abuse of power against this stellar soldier whistleblower under whistleblower protection, and what they did to him. Okay, what they did. So, you have to understand that playbook, and it's very, very important. So, you know, this is a new year. Happy New Year, 2026. And it's still Christmas. So happy Christmas. Merry Christmas to everybody. I hope you're really listening to the Christmas music still. We have it's called the Christmas Tide, right? The 12 days of Christmas. And people want to give up on Christmas so soon, but this is really the celebration, the 12 days of Christmas, to celebrate the birth of our Lord. And so I just want to put that in there because it's been really, really such a great time, a great celebration. And when observe the 12 days of Christmas, it takes pressure off of, just trying to do it in one day. So it really is wonderful, and it's a wonderful time of the year. And I just hope everybody is enjoyed it and is enjoying it still. Um, During Christmas, I don't think Maduro and his wife, Nicolas Maduro and his wife, uh, enjoyed it too much. Okay, so a mission, an operation was going on, was happened, and he is now uh, have been indicted. I guess he's indicted, but he has been captured and uh, and then brought to the United States. And there's I just want to I'm trying to wrap my head around the difference between Maduro and El Mayo. And so I thought I would talk about it, right? Let's talk about it. Let's hash it out. I know that this has a lot to do with oil because in Mexico there was so much siphoning of oil, billions of barrels from Pemex stealing from the people of Mexico, because Pemex is owned by the people of Mexico, and that was being siphoned and then sold back to. I mean, it's just crazy. It's so crazy, the exploitation of people by these really uh, dirty leaders like the Attorney General, Cesar Paneche. Cesar Paneche's mansion was was raided. And he's hiding out in Texas now. But and he was the attorney general. He was the prosecutor when everything happened to Richard. That's why we are keeping a very close eye on everything that happens with him, because he was brought in by the Mormon faction leadership, the highest leadership, that is right there rubbing shoulders with Beto O'Rourke, and that's Woody Hunt and Alejandra de la Vega Foster and her husband Paul Foster. Our intelligence has brought it to our attention that he was recommended from Mexico City to be brought up to Chihuahua, Mexico, under the new Pan Party of not Cesar Duarte. He's been arrested too now, right? He's been arrested too. But no, it was under Maru Campos Galvan. And yeah, that's wow. Um, and that was with the recommendation also for General Kelly to be in her um, security uh, analysts, or yeah. Um, I have to look at my notes. I'm trying to do everything by memory, but He's absolutely uh, General Kelly. Every time I mention his name, it makes me so, uh, what a traitor, what a traitor, right? And because of him, also, John Kelly, you would think that he would care about our soldiers. But he became a foreign agent for the Mexican Chihuahua government, as an advisor to Mario Campos. He has all kinds of secrets and knowledge about uh, our military, our Marines, everything. And he went and what a traitor! What a traitor! Um, it's so disturbing, right? So I really hope that he is one of the next ones to be indicted and arrested. I really do, um, because it's just so criminal, so criminal. Um, and if you're in the military, you absolutely understand what I'm talking about. That kind of betrayal is you can't just it goes beyond criminal, right? Um, so because it puts so many lives in danger, so many. Um, so let's get back to the difference between El Mayo and Maduro, Nicolás Maduro, because there's a lot of controversy going on, and that's why we want to understand it, right? One of the we can do similarities, we can do um, differences. And a big difference that sticks out right away is that one is using the government, right? One is a government official, and that's Maduro. And the other, El Mayo Zambada, um, even though he absolutely was in cahoots with the state government, was absolutely in cahoots with um, the PAN party, the of Cesar Duarte and of Mauro Campos, right? But right now, it's they're not in cahoots because he was betrayed. But he's a civilian. He's a civilian. So one is a government official, and the other one is a civilian. So that's a huge difference. And for for us to understand the law and you know the methods of um, capturing, extraditing, indicting, uh, that is a huge, huge difference. And so, and I'm not an expert in it at all, but I just think that you know it needs to be put out there, um, because they were both in the business of one big narco fentanyl seller. Now uh, they're saying that Maduro was also doing that, and I don't doubt it that he was. It's a lot of money, and you see, we know that the Chihuahuan government was all about it, right? We know that Fort Bliss was all about it, that El Paso's all about it. We know that Fort Huachuca's all about it. They all like the criminal trafficking. It's a lot of money. Um, and that's why they want to affect the elections and everything. Um, so I have no doubt that Maduro was involved in that. With the cocaine and all of all the reports, but I think that there's something more there. I think that this has to do with, of course, Venezuela. Everyone knows that Venezuela has diamonds. Everyone knows that Venezuela has oil, a sweet oil, not just any kind of oil, but really nice sweet oil. We also know that there's a lot of, like, what's Bitcoin, that kind of online money, right? Online money. Richard had Bitcoin. Richard had a lot of Bitcoin. And it's like I think they those people that had access to him and his phone and his car and his body and everything, absolutely knew he had Bitcoin, right? And we know that, and you should see the fear and Soto's eyes, the CID agent that was working with us, when we mentioned Bitcoin and anything financial about Richard, because you have the fraud. I mean, Danae Katzen was on the fugitive list just yesterday again, right? And she was in possession, her family was in possession of Richard's credit cards and financial information. So, the fraud is absolutely very clear that you can become very, very rich with these Bitcoin kind of monies and oil but there's also so Maduro, of course, he was into all of that with the mining with the diamonds, but he was also in connection with Russia and with China and Cuba, right? Um, so that he could the sanctions that were against him, he wasn't paying that. I don't know if he was paying the tariffs, right? I think this all has, it's much more complicated than what people make it out to be. And if you want to have a sovereign United States, you can't have people that don't respect your laws. If you if they're going to cheat when it comes to sanctions um, or the tariffs and everything. Now you could argue with me. This is just a discussion, right? This is just a discussion to put it out on the table. Let's absolutely. I want to know more about it, because I've been listening to Tucker Carlson, calling Maduro conservative. Um, I've listened to others calling Maduro a dictator. Um, the big, so I'm trying to hash out, and I think it's important because it's important to Mexico, it's important to Panama, um, eh, it's important to China, which is important. All of this has to do with the Mormon faction that absolutely um, was involved in the taking of our son's life. We know that Connell Wetton, um, and being the FBI, leaked our son's name to the cartel. We know that General John Kelly was Southcom. Southcom, is South America, right? Is Panama. I would really love to see the whole border of Southcom, the whole area that he knew so much about, and I'm sure it has to do with Venezuela, right? Colombia, all of that stuff. So, you know, uh, this is, I'm not saying I'm right about something or I'm wrong about something. I'm saying uh, th- the discussion for the differences and the similarities between El Mayo Zambada and Maduro is worth talking about, right? It's worth talking about to get a fuller knowledge to really drive those that have our son's remains to give us our son's remains. We want our son back, right? We want our son. So I know that with Maduro, I know that with El Mayo, it's about drugs, it's about the online money like Bitcoin, it's about the oil, it's about this huge uh, profit trafficking, criminal trafficking. So, and it's, it has compromised so many that you have the tampering of elections in order to keep it going. You have um, the orchestration of the Walmart mass shooting to keep it going, right? And that fake narrative. You have the psyops of taking whistleblower lives, like Glennon Oakley Jr. I really believe that that was a psyop against him. And I know for a fact it was a code red with our son, and there's many more involved in all of this, and their aim was to keep the trafficking going, right? So to tamper with the elections to keep the trafficking going, to absolutely have control over the law enforcement and a judicial system so that they, will never be held accountable, so they think. um and uh, you know um and why? What is their real aim? The billions that continue to have all the billions of money? Well, okay, you can say, yeah, yeah. Access to all the oil, the power, the guns, the this. Yeah, I think so too. But I think their golden goose or their real aim, their real, and I shouldn't have called it a golden goose at all. I take that all back. Um, but I think that evil, their real evil intention is um, is absolutely to get access to children because they brought in so many children, 500,000 children in just like what, 2 years, um, so many children, and our information, the way they're targeting them, and our information, witness information, intel information, is that what was happening on Fort Bliss to these children? It was so bad, y'all. It was making people shake. It was making people wet themselves. It really was, because they were just so shaken by the whole thing. And I think it's access to children. And I think that that was the main reason why Richard stood his ground, because he knew children were being hurt. And that's a consensus in our family. They were like, maybe Richard would look the other way for this or that, but not if they're hurting children. Not if they're hurting children. And we know through Leilani Hart's paperwork, and notarized, filed. I mean, her guide to her coach to file it was her cousin, who she was having um, an intimate relationship with, and that was Tavita Nusa. He was, that's been all confirmed to us, and he was coaching her to get that legal paperwork in, where she's just accusing Dallas Hart of the worst type of crimes between brothers and father, worst type of crimes against other children, right? In her master bedroom, worst type of crimes, uh, with the pornography, the worst type of crimes, torture, pornography, when it deals with really young children like that, that's all torture. And so she, is panicking because that's the same time period of what happened to Richard, and she's submitting it. Right, they're trying to cover themselves from this horrendous crime, and so she is confessing to these crimes, and she submits a report confessing that her husband in the VAIDS Pablo, who has access to files and who has the power to pay out veteran benefits and everything, get all that done, that he's using that fraudulently, that he is absolutely forging things, that he is, and she's saying it, not me. I'm not saying it. She has said it, and she's saying it in official documents. Um, so, it's very clear that there is a network, right? A network, and that's connected to the El Mayo, El Chapo network in Chihuahua, Mexico, that was infiltrating into El Paso and Fort Bliss, are living. They're all living over in El Paso, I mean, Carlos Manuel Salas, Rafael Arellano Caron, Rosa Maria Purchase Arellano Caron, Cesar Paneches in Texas. I mean, they're all, where does Cesar Duarte's wife go when she is being indicted in Mexico? She goes to Miami. They're all living, their wives and all of that, and their children going to school, all in El Paso and in Texas, and in the border American side of things, right? Um, so, so something is going good in the United States for them to want and choose, and even illegally live in the United States. So, um, this is really uh, what people have to understand. Um, I don't think they're going and living in Venezuela, even though they're absolutely connected with that, right? Connected with that. Um, so Maduro is a failed leader. They're saying he's an illegitimate leader, like James Montoya. James Montoya is illegitimate. I wish that Trump would remove James Montoya from his position, like he just removed Maduro, who's illegitimate, from his position. The harm that Bono Montoya is doing right now is just huge, huge harm that he's doing um, in the El Paso area. So, yeah, that you can really show a similarity there. The way that El Mayo was extradited, it with the plane and all of that, it was totally illegal. Why would they do it that way, right? But with Maduro and not going along with international law, right? Not paying the sanctions or tariffs or whatever. I think it's sanctions. Um, and then, siphoning oil and, um, hurting the security of the United States by being collaborating with um, those that that will facilitate not paying the sanctions and stuff. And that, of course, is Russia and China. They are in Cuba. I don't know how that's why I'm putting it out there, and I hope that in a nice way that you give your opinion and some insight into what's going on, because I just think it's much more complicated than what right now is being reported on. I think mining has a lot to do with it. I think, of course, this cryptocurrency, has something to do with it. I think the oil has something to do with it. Um, and of course, the trafficking. But I really think that the other is really what can really harm a country. I think you can recover from uh, some other things, but when it comes to destroying the economy of a country, yeah. Uh, Even though, Tucker is saying that Maduro's pretty conservative, doing all of these things that we should be doing, um, uh, you know, uh, I think that. that's just too simplistic of a view. I think there's other things to take into consideration if he's trying to thumb his nose up at the United States, especially when the United States gives all this money, right? So yeah, it's going to be an interesting discussion moving forward, and I think we're going to get more insight with that. I know that this is really going to play a huge role in Mexico, in Chihuahua, Mexico, and what's going on at the border. And so we're really praying that it will add pressure, add a driving force to get Richard's remains released to us. That's what we're praying for. So thank you, Laura, for coming on. Thank you, Danielle, for coming on. Thank you so much, everybody, and I hope that you have a great evening. Please share everything because we are a government of the people, by the people, for the people, and sharing is how we drive this forward. So thank you so much. God bless you, and I will be back.